She was not supposed to be beautiful. That was the first thing Edmund Blackwell noticed when he stepped through the heavy oak doors of Ashford Solicitors on a grey Tuesday morning in October. Not the stack of letters bound in black ribbon upon the desk, not the rain hammering against the Georgian windows, not even the sharp scent of ink and burning tallow that filled the room. No, it was her. Miss Cecily Vane sat with her spine perfectly erect, her gloved hands folded atop a leather folio, her dark eyes moving across a document with the focused intensity of a woman who understood precisely what was at stake. She wore a gown of deep blue wool, simple and unadorned, and yet on her it possessed the gravity of a queen's regalia. A single curl had escaped the careful architecture of her chignon and rested against the pale curve of her jaw, trembling faintly in the draught from the door Edmund had just opened. She did not look up. "Close it," she said, her voice low and unhurried. Edmund Blackwell had been many things in his 29 years upon this earth. He had been a soldier. He had been a gentleman's investigator. He had been, on more than one occasion, a liar in the service of men far wealthier and far less deserving than himself. He closed the door, and he understood with a cold clarity that settled somewhere behind his sternum that this particular commission was going to cost him something far dearer than coin. 3 days prior, he had stood in the gilded study of Ashford Hall, not the solicitor's modest office, but the ancestral seat of His Grace Harland Ashford, the Duke of Wycliffe, and listened to a man destroy a woman's name with the unhurried precision of someone who had rehearsed the act many times before. "Miss Vane," the Duke had said, his voice as smooth and cold as marble beneath a winter frost, "has made a claim on my late brother's estate. She presents herself as his betrothed, armed with letters, forged letters, I am certain, and the testimony of a maidservant whose loyalty, I suspect, has been purchased." He had poured 2 glasses of claret without asking, and set one before Edmund as though the matter were already settled. "I need those letters discredited. I need her credibility dismantled before the arbitration hearing on the 1st of November. Find something, anything, that speaks to her character, her history, her motives. Find me the crack in the foundation, Mr. Blackwell, and I shall pay you handsomely to drive a wedge into it." Edmund had taken the coin. He always took the coin. It was the only philosophy he had managed to sustain since leaving the regiment. And so he had come to the offices of Ashford Solicitors, the firm she had engaged, a separate establishment entirely from the Duke's own legal counsel, under the pretense of being a clerk seeking employment, armed with a manufactured history and a talent for invisibility that had served him well across a decade of morally ambiguous endeavors. He had not accounted for the girl with the dark eyes who told him to close the door. The days that followed were exquisite torment. Edmund installed himself in the anteroom on the fabricated authority of a letter of introduction he had composed himself, and watched. He read the dockets she left upon the table. He listened through the thin plaster wall as she argued her position with her solicitor, a nervous, balding man named Mr. Potts, and was struck repeatedly and against every his intention by the lucidity of her mind. She did not weep. She did not appeal to sentiment. She laid out the facts of her case with a methodical precision of a barrister, though no woman in England was permitted to stand before a panel and be called one. She had known Lord Frederick Ashford for 3 years. She had been engaged to him for 14 months. She possessed 37 letters in his hand. Edmund had counted them, each one burning his fingers as he turned the pages, for they were not the stilted correspondence of a man performing obligation, but the urgent, unguarded outpourings of a man genuinely, hopelessly in love.
The handwriting matched every sample Edmund had managed to procure. The seals were authentic. The maidservant's testimony, when he tracked the woman down and applied the practiced pressure of a man who knew how to ask questions, did not waver by a single syllable. The crack the Duke had promised him was not there. If you are enjoying this story, dear listener, do take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the Duke's Lost Letters, because every story I tell is one I have poured my whole heart into, and your support means the world. What Edmund discovered instead, as November drew nearer and the candles in the anteroom burned lower each evening, was something far more dangerous than evidence. He discovered that Cecily Vane took her tea without sugar because she said sweetness without effort was a false economy. He discovered that she laughed, rarely, but when she did, it transformed her entire countenance into something so unguarded and luminous that it struck him like a physical blow. He discovered that she refused 2 previous offers of marriage, both from men of considerable fortune, because she had already given her heart entirely and irrevocably to a man who was no longer living, and she would not insult his memory by settling. He sat on the other side of that plaster wall with his eyes closed and felt the peculiar agony of a man being educated in his own wretchedness. It was on the 23rd of October, 9 days before the hearing, that she found him. He had been in the records room, a narrow, cold passage lined with shelves of box files, when the door opened and Cecily stepped inside carrying a candle, its flame swaying violently in the draught she admitted. She stopped when she saw him. In the close proximity of that small room, with the candlelight painting her features in gold and shadow, Edmund felt the full and catastrophic weight of what he had been engaged to do. "You are not a clerk," she said. It was not a question. He could have lied. He had lied to better people in worse circumstances. Instead, he heard himself say, "No, I am not." The silence between them was extraordinarily loud. "You were sent by the Duke," she said, and her voice did not tremble, though her fingers tightened perceptibly around the candle holder, "to find something with which to ruin me." "Yes." "And have you found it?" Edmund looked at her, at the steadiness of her gaze, at the dignity she wore like armor over what he knew must be a grief so profound it had reshaped the entire architecture of her life, and said the only true thing he had said in 9 days. "There is nothing to find. Your case is honest. Your letters are genuine. Frederick Ashford loved you, Miss Vane, and his brother knows it, and the cruelty of what he has set in motion is something I will not be party to any further." Her breath left her in a slow, controlled exhalation, and then, to his considerable alarm, her composure cracked, not into tears, but into something raw and more terrible, a single, shuddering breath of relief, as though she had been standing on a precipice for months, and someone had finally, unexpectedly pulled her back from the edge. "You will testify to this? To your commission? To the Duke's instructions?" "I will give you everything," Edmund said, "every instruction he gave me, every penny he paid, in writing if you require it, before the panel if they will hear it." She looked at him for a long moment, the candlelight between them trembling. "Why?" Edmund had no practiced answer. He had no manufactured history to fall back upon, no fabricated letter of introduction to present. He had only the unglamorous, inconvenient truth of a man who had walked into a room intending one thing and found himself entirely reformed by the woman standing in it. "Because," he said quietly, "some things cost more than coin." The arbitration hearing on the 1st of November was brief. Edmund's testimony regarding the Duke's commission proved devastating. The panel ruled in Cecily's favor before noon. Lord Frederick Ashford's estate, modest by ducal standards, but sufficient for a life of dignity and independence, passed into the care of his true betrothed, as he had always intended. The Duke of Wycliffe left London for the Continent before the winter set in, and was not greatly missed. And Edmund Blackwell, who had arrived in that anteroom as a man without conviction, and departed it as a man undone by one, spent the long months that followed discovering that redemption, like love, tends to arrive unannounced, through a door left slightly open, in a draught of cold October air, before you have had time to compose yourself or close your expression. He was not supposed to be reformed. But then, she was not supposed to be beautiful. And yet. If this story moved you, dear listener, if you felt the cold of that records room and the warmth of that single candle, then you are exactly where you belong. Please like this video, subscribe to The Duke's Lost Letters, and ring the bell so that you never miss a story. There are many more letters left to open, many more hearts left to mend. Until next time, may every love letter find its way home.